The 1940s and 1950s were a complicated time for race and relations, not just in the United States, but also in Canada. Sports was one place where many inroads were made, and baseball was at the forefront. There were Canadian towns looking for players, and black players looking for a place to play. Indian Head, Saskatchewan was one of those places. It was a golden opportunity that happened right here on the prairies.
The distance now, it seems far, far away, but when we were younger, this little distance didn't seem as far.
At 90 years old, Willie Reed and Nat Bates move a lot slower these days, but they clearly remember their glory days on the baseball field.
I enjoyed turning the double play.
They've been friends since middle school and have lived in Richmond, California for most of their lives. But still reminisce about a time 7 decades ago when they moved north to play baseball on an all-black team. It was July 1st, 1952. The town of Indian Head, Saskatchewan was celebrating its 50th anniversary. The main event was dubbed Canada's greatest baseball tournament. It attracted thousands of fans. And on the mound for the Indian Head Rockets was a young black man from California, Nat Bates. Behind him at second base was one of his best friends, Willie Reed. That seemed like a great opportunity for them.
It was exciting. Our primary goal, we wanted to play baseball, and the opportunity was there. The Canadians were extremely polite, friendly, supportive. We had a pretty good baseball team, and we generally filled the stands wherever we played. That was a fun and exciting opportunity for us, being young, inexperienced, and enjoying life.
Well, it was different because we were young and never been out of the country. This is the first time, so we were young and eager to explore and go up there and play baseball because we had a inkling being in the majors later on in life and so forth. So we figured that would be a good experience. And it was a pleasant experience.
In the 1940s and 1950s, baseball was woven into the fabric of summertime for many in Saskatchewan, Alberta, and Manitoba. Leagues and big money tournaments were marked on the calendar as a respite from the summer doldrums on the farm or in small prairie towns. In 1952, there were more than a dozen leagues on the prairies, with 4 operating in Saskatchewan. There were teams like the Indian Head Rockets, the Swift Current Indians, the Regina Caps, the Kamsack Cyclones, the North Battleford Beavers. Max Weeder is a baseball historian from Vancouver. He wrote a chapter about the 1952 Indian Head Rockets in the book Our Game 2, Influential Figures and Milestones in Canadian Baseball. It was the culture of the time that was Weeder's motivation.
It's a story of an all-black team, African Americans coming up to Indian Head, other all-black teams, Medicine Hat, Brandon, Winnipeg had them, on the Canadian prairies, and the interaction between the community, the players, and overall just the general difference they had playing in Canada versus the southern United States. And then also following just a tournament and local ball teams, the financial pressures, how Saskatchewan and the Canadian prairies were changing post-World War II.
Black men from the United States, Cuba, and Puerto Rico made up a handful of teams and parts of dozens of others across Canada, with many of them playing on the prairies. All had their own journeys to get to Canada. Nat and Willie were no different. They grew up together in Richmond, California, near Oakland, playing both high school and college baseball together at Contra Costa College. From there, the fresh-faced players from Northern California made their way north, first to Medicine Hat to play with the Mohawks, then a season later with Indian Head.
We had a baseball coach by the name of Gene Core, and somehow he made contact with the owner of the, at the time, Medicine Hat Mohawks, Bud Swiegel, I guess. And they were looking for baseball players, and as a result, several of the college, my teammates, Willie Reed, I guess Emmett Till, Winters Calvin, and Pumpsey, we all were recruited, directed to Bud, and wound up first playing with the Medicine Hat Mohawks. The second year, we had no awareness of whether we were going back to Canada or not. But apparently, Bud Swiegel had switched teams, and he left the Medicine Hat Mohawks, and he joined in and had the Indian Head Rockets.
The Rockets were run by a local sports legend and then Indian Head Mayor Jimmy Robeson. With thousands of dollars on the line at tournaments across the prairies, he sent a call-out to recruit the best players he could find. And the best were Black and Cuban Americans. His daughter, Leona Farrell, never learned exactly why her father ended up recruiting an all-black team, but she says she can understand why.
Because A, he loved baseball, and he certainly followed what was happening to the black players with the leagues in the States. And he realized that there were phenomenal black baseball players, and so I think that's what he wanted to kind of profile.
It was the perfect mix of the right place and the right era for baseball teams on the prairies and Black and Cuban players looking for a place to play. Like most players that came north to play baseball, the motivation was to keep playing and make a few dollars in the process.
It was a golden opportunity, you know, as a high school athlete. Our ambition was always to go as far as we could go, and meaning that we would try to get into professional baseball in the major leagues. That was the dream of most anyone who plays the game. And this was an opportunity that enhanced our ability to perhaps make it into the professional Major League Baseball.
The Rockets themselves were made up of players from all over the United States, so it wasn't just the adjustment to a new country and culture, it was also a time to get used to new teammates.
The team with the Rockets was all black. So we not only had to adjust to the people in Canada, we also had to adjust to our teammates because their culture coming from the South and was a lot different than ours.
The fans were in awe of the skills of the black players who came from the United States to play for their hometown team, welcoming them into their society and homes. It was a great experience for Nat and Willie, who made their way north, escaping the social injustices of the time for just a little bit. But there was a bit of culture shock.
Surprisingly, coming from the United States, where right after the war we had experienced a lot of racism in housing and just in personal relationships. But in Canada, I never experienced any racial. The only thing that you might call racial, but it wasn't, is that they referred African Americans as darkies. They said, "Oh, hi, darky," you know. It wasn't disrespectful, but I guess it was just their way of identifying who we were. And they never called us Americans or Yankee or anything like that. They would just casually, "Good morning, darky," you know, that kind of thing.
It's a small part of a complicated story of black athletes in Canada, the end of the Negro Leagues in the United States, and a small town's love affair with their baseball team and its players.
Baseball's complex history with race plays a large role in how Bates and Reed's baseball careers panned out. Racism within society in general in the early 1900s, and an informal agreement between Major League Baseball team owners preventing black and Latino players from playing baseball in their leagues was in place for decades before these two players were even born. But that color barrier was eventually broken. In 1947, the Brooklyn Dodgers called on Jackie Robinson to play Major League Baseball.
Almost everyone hears the story of Jackie Robinson and his impact on the integration of the American National Leagues. The Rockets wouldn't have come up here if Major League Baseball had done a better job of integrating. They simply took the star players and the marginal players, the minor leaguers. It was a long path to integration. Tom Alston, 1950, came up to the Rockets, was the first African American to integrate the Cardinals. Pumpsie Green, 1952, who came up with Nat and Willie and a couple other guys. 1959, Boston Red Sox, which is shameful.
Elijah Pumpsie Green's debut with Boston, 12 years after Robinson broke the color barrier, marked its own milestone. He became the first black man to play professional baseball for the Red Sox, the last team in Major League Baseball to integrate its roster. Green was close friends with Bates and Reed until his death in 2019. Decades after they hit the diamonds, their memories playing together still come back sharply.
We were in a tournament at Calgary, and one day we had to play a doubleheader. And one exciting thing happened. I was playing. I think in the doubleheader, I probably got something like 6 or 7 hits in that doubleheader, and I thought it was something special. And my friend Pumpsie Green got, I believe, he went 8 for 10. So that was an exciting thing, and that's something I remember all my life.
While Major League integration in 1947 slowly opened up opportunities for black and Latino athletes, it also spelled the end of the Negro leagues in the United States of America. The leagues had cropped up over the United States while baseball was segregated and gave black and Latino players a chance to play when the major leagues wouldn't. With the best talent being poached by the big leagues, owners couldn't sell tickets like they once did. They were forced to relocate or sell their teams to groups like Robinson's from Indian Head to survive. That would leave many black athletes looking for somewhere to play baseball.
It's quite a recurrent narrative from players that came up, whether to play baseball or football, because there were a few that came up to the CFL as well, because the CFL started accepting black players earlier than the NFL. So definitely they experienced something completely different from the US, because in the US it was quite blatant. It was, we don't really care how good you are, you're still black, so just you can't really do much. In Canada, there was that caveat of, sure, you can play, especially if you can play really well, you kind of have a different relationship to the public than a regular person trying to, say, find a job.
Bates and Reed say they felt welcomed by people in Canada and even recalled being invited into people's homes for meals. Their experiences were dramatically different than what many black Canadians and black Canadian athletes experienced.
For the longest time, most of them are amateurs. So they'll definitely be taken in to play and run and do things for teams and national teams and so on. But when it comes to real life and actually making a living, it's a whole different experience. So yes, you do have sort of that dissonance where black Canadians who are from here, who are living here, very much recognize that it's a complex place to live. You never know where you stand. You may even go into a hotel one day, fine, they take you, and then another day, maybe an American tourist has complained, and therefore now they won't take you.
The first waves of black migration to Canada's prairies happened in the late 1800s and into the early 1910s. Between 1908 and 1911, about 1,000 black people settled in Alberta and Saskatchewan alone. But in 1911, after pressure from white Canadians, an anti-immigration campaign discouraged the entry of black people from the United States. That was followed up with an order in council banning their entry. Immigration was limited until the 1960s when policies changed. Until that time, employment opportunities were limited for Black people.
Many of the Black Canadian athletes are maybe barnstorm, players. If we go back to baseball, they're just, they're making just enough money to make even to be able to travel, but they're not feeding their families on that salary of baseball. They're having to find a regular job to actually make ends meet, and that's where that difference is, because when you have when you're living in the actual country, you will have trouble finding a job as a Black person.
Bates and Reed didn't make much money playing in Canada. The Rockets participated in tournaments with massive cash payouts, but both say they saw little, if any, of that bonus money. But for many of the players, their goal was to make the most of their opportunity to get as much time on the diamond as they could.
We wanted to make the team in the Indian Head Rockets the best team that we possibly could be. And we soon found out that we all had the same idea, and we learned to respect one another and enjoy each other.
It's been 70 years since the 1952 Indian Head Rockets left an indelible mark on the town. But after this long, memories do fade. Robin Jensen is president of the Indian Head Museum. She fell in love with the story of the town's relationship with an all-Black baseball team and how much that team meant to its residents. The museum is a treasure trove of artifacts from the era, from pictures, equipment, and even the day-to-day bookkeeping of the Rockets. And it all came together to honor the Indian Head teams of the late 1940s and early 1950s, including the 1952 Rockets.
So we are dedicating an exhibit to their story, and it's going to include stories about the players, a story about the committee who brought the players up to Canada, kind of like looking at it locally from the players' perspectives, and then sort of provincially. And we plan to unveil that exhibit in June during our Parade Day weekend, which is something that happens in the community every year.
Baseball meant so much to the fabric of Saskatchewan in the early 1900s and the better part of the century. Indian Head was just like many prairie towns of the time, in love with baseball and in love with their team.
Well, I think baseball, more so than hockey in the early days, was much more of the it sport. I do believe that. I mean, in the early 1900s, I think the first game was played in Saskatchewan here in 1884. Don't quote me on that, you have to look, but it was a game that everybody could play. It was a game, Saskatchewan's wide open fields, and all you literally needed was a ball and a stick. And so it appealed to everybody. And it was just, a game that was accessible to everybody. And so they loved it. Everyone loved baseball around that time.
Teams like the Rockets and the games and the tournaments brought people together from two completely different worlds. The visiting Black Americans took advantage of the opportunities in Canada to continue playing baseball and to experience a different country. Intentional or not, their short time in small towns did make a lasting impact, drawing fans in the thousands to see them play.
I think the two factors I mentioned before about the impact of the community and African American players coming up and that role it played in exposing people in Indian Head, people across the prairies, to people of different cultures. And I think that was certainly important. And it's important, I think, that we remember so much more history than we do.
Well, I guess it kind of pulled people together. As they went to the games, they'd visit and make arrangements to do other things. And I remember traveling to different communities for baseball games, which that would have never happened had we not had this team to follow. And I think quite a number of people did that, actually.
Our whole family was. As three teenage girls, We were always allowed to go to the games. And what I most remember is the excitement of going to the ball games and the excitement that there was in town. This feeling that this was wonderful to have them here. I think because it was unusual to have a black team here, and I think in the olden days, baseball was quite popular around here before I came. It just was an exciting time for the community, in my feelings as a teenage girl.
The summer of 2022 finished up with an incredible honor for the longtime friends and former teammates. Not just the exhibit at the Indian Head Museum, but the 1952 Indian Head Rockets induction into the Saskatchewan Baseball Hall of Fame. For a team, a town, a province, and two longtime friends, even 70 years past, it still holds a special place in their hearts.
The entire team were being inducted into the Hall of Fame. And unfortunately, many of my teammates, former teammates, are no longer with us. I think maybe Willie and I, we did maintain contact after the Indian Head Rockets experience. So maybe Willie and I just may be the only two surviving members of that team. I don't know, but it's a tremendous honor. We've both been inducted into the Hall of Fame for our high school as athletes and at Contra Costa College as athletes, but this is another opportunity and a milestone in our career as an athlete that we're very honored to be acknowledged.
I want to thank the Canadians for doing what they're doing, making us part of their baseball history. And from there, we'd like to, you know, I'm getting so excited here, I guess. But we want to thank the Canadians for letting us be part of their history.